Hey, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. Good morning in the UK. This is Cree, the counter racist evolving engineer, in for a broadcast this Friday, which is May 25th, 2019. And the purpose of this broadcast is singular. It is to demonstrate something very profound. I think it's been very profound in my life, and I think it would be very profound um, in the lives of most black people in the United States of America once it is grasped. And it's pretty simple, pretty extraordinary. Things hiding in plain sight. I had said that I was going to show visual proof, indisputable proof, that black people were native here, and that's what we're going to do today. Um, so I'm going to just set the background and then I'll just get right to the visual proofs. Um, you know, the first thing that made me start wondering if the story we were told was really true was thinking about the fact that we had always been told that the Native Americans were the first people as we thought about them, the Asiatic long-haired, straight-haired ones, that they just couldn't take it. They couldn't take slavery. And so then there was a bishop, Barth was Bartholomew de Casas, out of Portugal, and he was given permission to import Africans to do what the natives couldn't do here. And I thought, well, yeah, it would make sense to. Why would you go through all the trouble of importing something that you could just use as a resource that was already there? It's a lot of trouble. It's very hard. It was very hard going just to get back and forth, for the Europeans at least, because they had not been doing it very long. Um, it was just hard going. People died. A lot of stuff was lost, and so why would you go through all the trouble of possible insurrection and all the trouble of importing people when you could just use the ones that were there? And so then I started to wonder if that was really true, that all of the people who were native, or most of the people who were native to the Americas, died off, and then they were like completely replaced by Africans. That was like the first thing. Um, I then started to notice, I was prompted by a friend I met over the internet to just take a closer look and see if I saw differences, physiological differences between black people in the Americas, or in the United States, that I'm used to seeing, and Africans. I had always thought we were exactly the same, not just heavily similar, but exactly the same. And he said, "Do you think the first person he said to me was, do you think LeBron James looks like an African?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "I don't." And then, over the next few weeks, I started to realize, no, not him, and not several people. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the color of one's skin and the texture of the hair. It's just different facial morphology. And, it's the same kind of variation that you can find on the continent of Africa itself, or amongst just all the different black populations. But then, what really locked it for me, and just locked it in my solar plexus, was when I actually went to the cinema, the movies, the theater, to see that film 12 Years a Slave. And a couple of things did it for me. One is, I had already gotten used to being able to differentiate between a continental African and a black person in America. And I didn't know anything about Lupita Nyong'o or I've forgotten the other lead, the main lead. Um, his last name or his first name begins with an O. I didn't know anything about either of those actors, but I knew they weren't. Lupita, I knew was not a Black American, and the other guy, I was with my husband at the time. The lead, we just kind of looked at each other because we both had an ability to just tell right away, and we just looked and we said, I don't know, I can't. He's, can you tell? He's borderline. Something's not. I don't know. He's border, and so we always wait for the credits, and we found out. Oh yeah. The reason we couldn't tell is because I mean, he's from the UK, and one of his parents is a Caribbean, which is, a form of an American. It's in the American region, and one is from, I believe, Nigeria or some part of West Africa, and so he's a hybrid, and that's why we couldn't tell. But that was the minor thing. Now here was the major thing that did it for me. The major thing that did it for me was that film was as accurate or as precise, I should say. I mean, it really mirrored what we'd always been told about the cruelty of slavery, and in a way that no other film did. Okay. Just the sheer terror that people were living under each and every second of every day. Just never knowing if you're going to be the one that was going to get pulled out and whipped, and having to listen to people's skin being ripped from their bones. Never knowing if you're going to be the one that was going to be slapped, or the one who's going to, all, and just working sun up to sundown. And it was just done in such a way that you really got just the cruelty of it all. And when the lights went up, before the lights went up, I mean, I just realized that was impossible. It was impossible for it to have happened that way for a large number of our ancestors. And because I know that no one can reproduce under those circumstances, even in modern times. If you've got a husband and a wife who are just working really hard at their jobs all the time, just working 12, 16 hours a day, one or the other, usually both, are going to lose. And if they're under a lot of stress as well, I mean, one, just working really hard, but if you've also got some kind of stressors where someone in your family is ill, or you're about to lose your house, whatever, sex is the first thing that goes. You don't reproduce. And then even under a lot of stress, what happens is hormones, the balance of hormones for the woman goes awry. Stress decreases. God, I need to get this right. Stress decreases progesterone in women, and it causes estrogen levels to go too high. But you need to have a good level of progesterone to be able to conceive. So, and then, just real simple, we all know that animals in zoos, animals in captivity, animals, we're not even talking about people, they had the hardest time getting them to reproduce. So I just knew, just logically, there was no way our numbers could have grown like that if that was the major form of slavery. I'm not saying that didn't happen. That kind of cruelty did happen, but I think it happened as, it was a terror tactic on those of us who were native. I'm not denying that people weren't imported from Africa to into being enslaved, but I think the numbers were smaller, and I think the primary way that we were subjugated, the primary form of slavery, was pretty close to what it is today. Sorry for that. Which is that we're just really stressed out, and we're barely making ends meet. We're being denied access to the resources we need, the resources that we're making good use of. And we just try to live to see another day. We just try to live to see that next summer spate of barbecues and cookouts and picnics and Thanksgiving dinners, but under a whole lot of stress. And we keep making money for them. They get the lion's share of our labor in a way that doesn't compare to anybody else. And I'm pretty sure that's the way that it was going down then, obviously at a much lower tech. But that's pretty much, I think that had to be the form of slavery. Because if that were not the case, I don't see how we could have grown to the numbers that we are now. We would be extinct. We wouldn't have been able to reproduce. This is my thinking. So then I started to look into it, and even more heavily. I said, well, I need proof. Well, then what would happen is I would find all of these images, because there were whole Facebook groups and pages dedicated to collecting these images of Black Native Americans. And so when I say Black Native Americans, you have to understand that there weren't the borders that there are now. So a Black Native American could be any place from the east coast of the what we now know as the United States, all the way out to the west coast in California, or Mexico, which is, it's the same continent, but also all through, that's North America, but also all through South America. Central America is just like sort of almost like a peninsula, just joins them. And so, yeah, we have a long history. And it's not going to be possible this is not going to be something super comprehensive in terms of just how far back it goes. But it goes, maybe I could do a follow-up and have a guest on who is more expert than me. But certainly, it started with Ivan Van Sertima, but there's new scholarship. I think the best new scholarship that's come out, and I'm sort of angry about Graham Hancock's new book, because it's the usual thing. I think the best new scholarship that's come out about the Black presence in the Americas was by Horace Butler. His style of writing turns a lot of people off. I've tried to get people to read his book, but he writes in first person, and that's not the style of our day. It hasn't been for, when people want serious history, they don't want it in that style. Even though it's funny because that's the style that people enjoy it on videos now, right? But they don't want it in books. And that was the style that history was told centuries ago, but it's fallen out of style now, because if you say, well, I thought about this, and then you give if you talk about what you were feeling or what you were doing as you discovered a thing, and then you head into the results of what you discovered, it's still the same information, but for some reason it seems less academic to us, to a lot of people. It doesn't to me, but his is the best scholarship. And he was able to predict, with his scholarship, the location of a grave underneath a mural, I believe the Bonaparte mural in Central America. I've forgotten which country that is. But he was able to predict that, and National Geographic found it. But he had already sent them the information, and then they found it, and they didn't give him credit. And so now you've got this white guy that's come out named Graham Hancock, and he's written a book. And his work demonstrates that the civilization most likely did start not in the eastern continents. It probably did start here. Now, we're not talking about At this point, we don't know about whether the first people evolved here, but we do know that it's looking very strong that the very first civilizations were here in the Americas, because there are these huge, they're now uncovering these huge cities because they've cut down some portions of the Amazon for soybeans and stuff like that. And so they're finding is just there were like 20 million people living in, like, I think the 1500s, in cities that were just, hundreds and hundreds of cities that had 50,000 people in it, and it had a high level of technology to it, had man-made soils. And so, my question to the skeptics is, why if you know that we had at least a 250,000 years head start on any other kind of people, why would you think we weren't here first? Why would you think we hadn't figured out how to take ships over here? Why would you believe that? Why would you believe that we just stayed if we thought Africa was our home, and we would have never, and we didn't venture out amongst the world and do things? Why would you believe that? I have no idea why anybody would believe that the only place that we could get to is someplace where we walked, given what people who are very Afrocentric hold to be our high level of scientific progress. So just even knowing what you know about Egypt, I have no idea why people would believe that. But what I said, this is just talk, right? But I am just trying to set it up. I'm gonna give the images, and the object here is to not just give a zillion images, but to just meet that standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. And so, why is this important? Well, grasping that we are likely, very likely, greatly, if not mostly, descendants of Black Native Americans is important for the following reasons. A, it informs us how anti-Blackness has been so successfully practiced. What I just spoke about in terms of just keeping us going to another day. It's just going along to get along. We didn't know that before. We thought we were in some unique stage of our progress through the system of anti-Blackness. But if we know that this is how it was done in the 16 and 1700s, now we know we're going to have to do something drastically different, because we've been falling for the okie doke, just trying to go to another day and just keep jobbing, and then one day we'll figure it out. So that's one reason. If we grasp that this is they took us over, and we've been doing exactly what we're doing now for 400 years. B, the reason that it's important is that it reminds us, is that you see the images, you're going to see that these images are in the custody of people who are not Black. So it's going to remind us that our most critical records that we would need, say, even right now, in the current political moment, will remind us that they have all the critical records to prove our lineage. Because the first person who made me aware of this several decades ago was Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, because she was talking about how all of the African artifacts that proved that Freud and the other one, Freud and the great supposedly psychologists, that they got all their stuff from Africa, and so and that you would find it all in the private collections of a lot of Germans. But it's all around the world. It's all this evidence that I'm going to show you. They're, they're in collections. Some of it's here in the United States, but a lot of it's in Holland. It's in Germany. We don't have custody of these records, and it's like an open secret. There's some of it is in a chapel/museum in Spain, but it's just hiding in plain sight, but not for us because they've deliberately taken stuff out. I know I saw one map that clearly showed that the Native Americans were black people, and then, but I know that. See, when I would find all of these images on Facebook, I needed to know what the source of it was because I knew that I couldn't just put the images up. Now these maps are so detailed that I know that there are no black people that had the time or resources to access these very, very antique maps and then and detailed maps, and then to just go shade them in. We're not on that level, and to go draw some black people on it. Like, I know that if I see black people on a map, it's because that's what the white people drew on them. So there were a few maps in which I was able to take that image when I saw it on Facebook and download it. But then when I searched for that, did a reverse image search, I found the map, but they had taken the black people off of it. The same way that they're chiseling stuff off in Northeast Africa, in Egypt. So they're scrubbing this stuff deliberately. Another reason that it's very important is because, when you've been someplace for tens of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years, there are ways that you change from where you came from because you are in geographic isolation, and so there are going to be certain genetic sequences that are going to be more common. You're not necessarily going to know where they are, and there might be tiny little snippets, but of DNA, but they may be significant in terms of our biology and our neurology, right? So we have some differences, and it shapes our behavior as well as our health and what's good for us. It shapes the things that we like and don't like, and there are ways that make us different than, say, black people in other parts of the world. And as I've said, on a team, everybody has a role. Everybody can't play the same role. We can't all be the same. You have to take into account differences and somehow forge a solidarity with the other black people or the other people on your team who are different. And so when we know that this is our lineage, this is our history, we know we're different, and we know we're going to have to take that into account. Just trying to all be this effort to try to get all black people to be alike is doomed to fail because we're not alike. It's very similar to saying that the only way that women and men can be equal is if we're the same. We're not the same. We don't have to be the same to be equal. Okay? So, yeah, we have to take the differences into account, and this will prove that we've been isolated enough. We've been over here long enough to where we're different enough to where we have to take that into account. It's and then also in the last point in terms of why this is important to grasp, that we are descendants of people who have been over here a long time, is it encourages us to be curious about how the pieces fit together. As others claim to have been harmed as much as we have. When I say we, I mean black people globally, and then, black people specifically in the Americas. The claim of these straight-haired Asiatic Native Americans who have DNA very similar to Russians because, that's that same area, Central Asia. Um, they claim with all of their statistics, the ones who are left on the res, they claim that they've been harmed just as much as us. And they were, deprived of their land and so on. But when we know that that was us more than it was them, that undercuts that claim. And it helps a little bit more for us to just, because that's that last group that people have a hard time letting go of their hand, because they seem to really have a solid factual basis to say that they were harmed as much as we were, at least as much, maybe in a different way, but at least as much. But now that we know that story is us, that trail of tears was us, then we know that's not the case, because most of them have blended into urban America. The ones that are left are just, it's a skewed sample. It's just like the Appalachians are a skewed sample of white folks. Okay, that's not the norm for them. Just give me a second before I give you the images. A word about the most basic things that should have caused us to think about this more seriously. People can get invested. You get invested in an idea, whatever it is, and you spend your whole life doing it. And it's really hard, this mic, it's really hard to, it's like a bad marriage. You want that marriage to work, and it's bad, but you've put so much investment into it, or even something, or like a car, and you keep getting it repaired. You keep sinking money into it until you finally, it's just really hard to just say, this car is never going to be right. It's not right. Right? I'm really invested in this marriage, but it's not right. It's never going to be right. It's very hard to let go of stuff we were deeply invested into. So, and then, and I have all the understanding in the world for that. But, it's freeing to just, it's hard to swim against the truth. So it can be very freeing and empowering to just embrace the truth. It's not to say there weren't great civilizations on the continent of Africa. That's not the point here. Finally, let me say that before I begin with the images, I chose for this broadcast only images that are consistent with the Cree tool. That is to say, I was looking at that hair, not just the skin color, but I was looking at the hair. They're roughly drawn images on maps and so on. So, we were looking at noses and so on for those images, but there is a short video, a couple of short videos, well, one video in particular. It's mostly audio, in which it's a first-hand account of a white historian who actually describes the facial features. But for the imagery, I was looking at the hair. Now, in that audio that you will hear, this guy will be making reference to what he calls Black Native Americans that cover a whole range of people that I would not consider Black. They would not measure 195, but it just came with the video. We're over here, and then the Asiatic Native Americans came over here in a smaller number, and we were over here for such a long time that they weren't the only non-Black people that had been in the Americas. So, Horace Butler's work demonstrates that from that area of the world that would have been called, like, I think Mesopotamia at the time, they had sailed over here, and And so, yeah, there were some people, there's some mixtures. But when you look at the mixtures, to whatever degree, from, mulatto to Zombo, a Zombo is the opposite of a quadroon. So a Zombo is 3/4 black, 1/4 something else, usually Asiatic, Native American, but really just anything else. 3/4 black, 1/4 non-black. So, but when you see that, you know that the unmixed version was here pretty, very strongly in order for that mixture to even exist. But it's very clear that even up until the 1800s, what was thought of, it wasn't even questioned. When you see these images, you're going to see that up until 1800s, it was pretty late. The icon of a Native American was a black person. White people didn't question that. And then they started all this fiction, all this cover up, and I think, part of it, I hope that we'll be able to discuss this, because this, of course, has been pre-recorded. But I'll, once this part is over, phone lines will come up, and we'll be able to discuss why they did it and why they imported the Africans and what the whole strategy of it was. I listened to Brother Kofi on his live stream today, which was he just nailed it on his topic, the one drop rule and its place in the black firsts and all of that. It was just wonderful. But he also gave a pretty good theory as to why they did it this way. And once I heard that, I started thinking even more about why it was done the way it was done. With the importation, with the scrubbing of history and so on. But I will leave that for a discussion. I think that'll be a rather lively discussion. This isn't meant to be comprehensive, but just to meet that beyond a reasonable doubt standard. And with that, we'll just get to the visual demonstrations. So, I think I have my levels right. And see if I can make it somewhat pleasant for y'all. In the background, hope it's not too loud. But I'm not going to be talking too much over it. So, should be okay. My mic is up. Yep. It is. All right. Let's take off the globe. Here is a picture. Oh, here's the other thing. I almost forgot. If the image itself does not incorporate its source, because I don't want people saying that these artifacts and these maps were made up. If the image itself that I'm showing you does not incorporate the source of the image, it will be included at the end with some PDFs I'm going to show you. But some of the images themselves incorporate the source. This one does not. But this is, if you look at it, it's called the emblem of America. And just take a look at it. Take a look at the two, I believe they're children. And look at their hair, look at their coloring. Does that look like what we've been told a Native American was? But this is the emblem of of America. So this is the colonizer, the white woman, and she's there with the Native Americans. So, and this is what people were used to. An emblem is something that is just, when we say something is emblematic, it means this is the face of it. This is the ubiquitous, unquestioned face of a Native American. This is what Native Americans look like. Okay? That's Exhibit 1. And you can find that in pictures, not just pictures, Pictur, not just things that you pour liquid out of. But this is Exhibit 1. Exhibit 2. Here you see this came from the Amsterdam, so this is Holland, right? Amsterdam Pipe Museum, and this is the top of a cigar box called the Black Virginia. And if you can zoom in on it, you'll see the feathers in the head, and you'll see the coloring, and you don't see any hair hanging down. Again, that's a Black Native American. Was never even questioned, and of course tobacco was known to be a big part of Native American tradition and way of life, and we were experts at cultivating it, which is going to be important for an image that's coming up. But as you see the sources, you can look it up yourself. This one I had posted on my Facebook page a while back. VCU is Virginia Commonwealth University. So a VCU professor, Bernard Means, did a 3D scan and then did a 3D printing of a 1924. So as late as the 1920s, it was still well known that Native Americans were Black. Doesn't this blow your mind? It blows my mind. As late as the 1920s, it was well known that Native Americans were Black people. So here it says that he scanned it and then he printed it out, a 3D printer, print out of a 1924 cigar store figurine, and it says with African American facial features and Native American dress. You see how they twist everything? Native American, an African American facial features, Native American dress. You mean Black American in Native American? Because the Black American is the Native American? Like this is supposed to be some odd thing. We already know it's not. Even in 1924, because that was the biggest face of who the Native Americans were. And that's why they enslaved us right here on our lands. That's the way you would do it. It'd be too difficult to do too many of them the other way around. Maybe you would import a few, but they wouldn't procreate, right? So those were work camps, and kind of sort of like prisons were now. That's the way I'm looking at it. And they served as a warning to you, because if you didn't behave, you could get confiscated, because you could get mistaken for one and get pulled into it. And next thing you know, you're 12 years a slave, but you're a Native American, right? Or for the rest of your life a slave. It was carrot and stick. It was terrorism. But this isn't something strange. This is a Native American. Here is the map that I use as the banner on my YouTube channel, and I use it for a reason. And it is that little, right as you see the Black Native Americans standing near it. They may even be wearing fezzes, but you will see that it says Tamerica. And of course, this is a map of this area, this Florida area. And it's very important, because I have referred to Black Native Americans as Tamericans, because that is where America got its name, not from Amerigo Vespucci. Tom Mary. Anybody who has done some study of Kemetic history knows that Ta means land, Mary means beautiful, the beautiful land. It's the beautiful land. And that was coined because there were successive waves of people who came from different parts of Africa. There were those who came 300,000 years ago, maybe more than that, then maybe 100,000, and then 35,000. But about 35,000 years ago, some people came over from Africa and they established what I don't want to talk about in depth today, but they established the Kemetic Empire. It started here in the Americas. And that's why the pyramids are step pyramids. You have to learn how to do that first before you can learn how to do it all in one step and have smooth pyramids. But Ta Mary. And since they had been in Africa, they came over here, and just the people who decided to stay here thought, this land here is the beautiful land. This is amazing. This is amazing. And it goes backwards. So the wording of Moor, and then the Latin word mares, and so on, is because the navigators, the accomplished mariners, were people from the Americas, the beautiful land. And so seagoing became associated with people from this land, Ta Mary. Moors, Marys, Moors. And even the sea got named after the people who were from the beautiful land. So that's why, mares, or if you like Mexican seafood, they'll say, what is this? It'll say mariscos. Mariscos, that's seafood, right? Because I think mares is Spanish for sea. But that is how America got its name. Because that's our ancient name for it. Or at least one part of the black people who were here. There's a whole lot of black people who were here. And this is just one story. Okay, next image. This is another not nap. Might need one. This is another map. Now, I don't like this lower right-hand corner one, because these do not meet my definition of black people in the lower right-hand corner. But in the upper left-hand corner, you do see some black people. Hair not hanging down, dark-skinned. This is Virginia and Florida. We didn't make these maps. White folks made these maps. I cannot see this one as well, but you can see the source here. The other one I don't think you could see the source. No, so I'll be showing the source. So the source here is Texas history. You can find that online. You can even see that Texas history, what does it say, unt.edu. So yeah, this is another map of the Americas generally. And so in this lower right hand corner you see the Native Americans, and you see they were black people. I can't see well. I can't remember what it looks like in the upper left hand corner, but I believe those are black people as well. No hanging swinging hair, unless they're locks, but I didn't choose any of those. This was just because so you could see the source that it came from. This is in a let's see, creation information. It tells you when it was created, 1678. Or maybe no, this is the creator's lifespan, and it shows the extent of the American continents of California as an island, which is interesting. And this map is part of the collection entitled map collections from the University of Texas at Arlington and was provided by that university's library. Okay. That's the source of it. And you can buy it from a guy named Matthouse Suter. Yeah. Publication place, Augsburg, around 1730. Augsburg, I don't know where that is. Is that Switzerland? It's either, it sounds like it's Switzerland or Germany. The cartographer was Matthouse Suter, not you can buy it from him. Here is another map, and I could see them easier, but I know that it says I can make that bigger, but I definitely see the word America down here, and then I'm not sure what this, take another look here, what part of America. Florida again, but you see no hair hanging down. Black Native Americans. Now we're getting to the part of North America called Mexico, and this was an Aztec palace, and these were the Aztecs when Montezuma came up. And what do those Aztecs what do they look like? You see any swinging hair? Those are black men. Those are black people. So when you hear those Mexicans talk about how they're taking their land back, that all of California was Aztlan, Mexico wasn't even theirs. Mexico, like the rest of the Americas, was a black land. And I'm not going to be the only person that says this. I'm going to quote somebody else who's not black saying that exact same thing. This is just showing the source of that image. So this is imagining Mexico, and this came from, I'm going to stand up so I can see this. palaceofthegovernors.org. So I believe this is an official, I believe this is an official Mexican government site. How about that? And these straight-haired mestizos, they don't even know their own history. But that's the source of that image. This is a pretty hard one to take. This is the Spaniards. This is Cortez and his men. They've smoked out the palace. People are running, and then they've got soldiers running after them. And as they run past them, they've got a whole rampart here, and they're shooting at them. They're shooting arrows and stuff at them. But if you look, you can see black people. You can see black men. Feathers stick. And if you really think about the whole feather thing, think about how hard it would be. If you have straight, shine, you've seen how that hair is. That's the kind of hair you have. Do you know how hard it is to get feathers to stay in your hair? Even if it's a headband, that thing would keep slipping off. It'd be very difficult to keep that in your hair. You need tightly coiled hair to get those feathers to stay. Like some things, like you're like, duh, like how did we not know that? But you can see, hopefully you can see, I wish you could see my cursor, but hopefully you can see the clearly black men with tightly coiled hair with a feather sticking out. There's no hair hanging down here. These are black men being chased out of an Aztec palace. These are the Aztecs. And the Aztecs, their history, as it was told to in I think it was called the Letters of Cortez. It's in Horace Butler's book, but you can look it up yourself. The Aztecs themselves said, this was not their native land, that thousands of years ago there were voyages. Their foreparents sailed over here from the east, meaning Africa. But this is just one wave. You know, not all of the black people of the Americas came at that time. And you know, I can understand now why there are some people who have some doubt as to whether or not it's going to be eventually found, because it's looking very strong like civilization. The most advanced civilization was in the Americas, down there in the Amazon. And because of that, I can understand. It's no longer unreasonable to me. There is no evidence right now, but it's no longer unreasonable to me to believe that humankind actually started here rather than in the eastern parts. It's not unreasonable as it used to be for me. Right now, I still hold that humanity started in Africa, because I just haven't seen any archaeological evidence to the contrary. But as they keep digging stuff up from the Amazon, it could be found. Oh, so now this one, I just found this one so interesting. The source of it is, I didn't want it from, it's okay. It's a Pinterest, but it's okay because it tells where it came from. It's courtesy of the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Folk Art Museum in the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation in Williamsburg, Virginia, and it gives the image number. But this I find a really interesting image, because it's showing tobacco making, and it's showing two black people. One is a slave, right? So I'm assuming that's an African, and one's a Native American. You can tell, just by the attire. And the Native American, I'm sure, is instructing the African how to do it, because that was their thousands of year tradition. So it was well known that there, not all black people were Africans, or descendants of those who had been imported. That was what we've already demonstrated. That was known well into the 1800s, even up into the 1920s. But this one is just kind of astounding to me. Just astounding. This is what is this? This is a burial. It shows it's just a painting, a drawing of a burial in Mexico. But if you zoom in close, you'll see those are black people, and you see that is in the custody of a man in Amsterdam. And these, when you look at where these maps are and see how much they cost, they're anywhere from the high hundreds to thousands of dollars. The map that really got Horace Butler started was I just got done reading it, but I think it was like a $3 million map, and they make it impossible to get access to stuff. It's called the Walled Seer map. But yeah, you see, we don't have custody of this stuff. They do. They took it all. They burned our libraries. Sure did. Burned all our libraries, burned all the books in them. I'm talking about over here in the Americas as well as over in Northeast Africa. And then what little was left, they confiscated. And somehow we're expecting to be able to easily prove what our lineage was, even as a descendant of slave, however slave is defined, even if you define it as, a less technologically advanced version of what we're doing right now. We will obviously still be owed major reparations, right? I don't think we're gonna, we're not gonna get anything substantial, I don't think. But even just the, I'm good with the effort. But I say that the proof is my phenotype, my birth certificate, and you won't be able to connect my birth certificate to immigration, because we see what they've done with our records. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be an easy thing. I think people have gotten so enthusiastic about it now to where just the suggestion that it's not going to be as easy as you think it is, that probably 50 to 80% of us aren't going to be able to trace 51% of our ancestors in the year 1865 to an enslaved person, makes people angry. They just start saying outrageous things like, yes you will, because they didn't think about it. It's okay. It's tough out here. We're under so much stress. You make a mistake, big deal. I'm making mistakes. Like, my audio's too high, my audio's too low, takes me too long to get from one pic to the next. I don't have all the time, and I don't have the time that non-black people have. Or the lack of stress in my daily life, and the lack of stress in my DNA. Okay, so yeah, it takes us a while. Like we're hundreds of years behind, so it's okay. We get things wrong, as long as when we know how to make things better, we make things better. Do the best we can. Find typos, you let me know. You can't hear me, you let me know. My music's too loud, you let me know. Right? And if you want me to do the same for you, I will. This is kind of what I'm trying to do now. So this is maybe well known to you. Hopefully you've seen it before, but this is a very, very, very famous anthropologist. I think they call him an ethno. I'm not even going to try to say it in English, but ethnographer. That's it. So, and his name was Carlos Cuervo Marquez. And yeah, he was Spanish. He wasn't even Mexican. So he said this in 1920. You can just read it, but I want to read it because it's fun. The Negro type is seen in the most ancient Mexican sculpture. Now remember, Mexico is America. It's just a border that separates it. It's not a different landmass. The Negro type is seen in the most ancient Mexican sculpture. The Negroes figure frequently in the most remote traditions of some American pueblos. It is to this race doubtlessly belongs the most ancient skeletons, distinct from the red American race, which have been found in various places from Bolivia to Mexico. It is likely that, we repeat, America was a Negro continent. Here's that emblem, or similar, but this time it's in a painting. And does it show the source? This is called an emblem of America. Again, it wasn't even questioned that the Native Americans were black. Now I think they were made small, like small children, because it's to show that, it's supposed to show our relationship to them, childlike, while she lords over us. And the source of it was published by, you can look at the bottom, John Fairburn in London. And it's the, what collection is this? The Providence B. Mastel collection. You see it goes for, they actually sold it. My goodness. So, wow. Oof. So they said they estimated it was supposed to go for between $700 and $1,000, but they actually sold it for more than double that. Goodness. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's in the parentheses there, because it looks like it sold for $2,124, but then you see $1,800 next to it. But you see how much this information is coveted by them and kept from us. Something that simple. because it's not simple. Another version of it. No hair hanging. Black Native American feathers in the hair. Emblem of America. Did it have a date on it? Yeah, this is circa 1800. What was the date on the other one? Let's go back. Did that have a date on it? Yep. 1798, so around the same time. See, this is what I'm saying, right? You know, it wasn't even questioned. They knew who the Native Americans were. Here's another white man talking about us. Jean-Baptiste Leonard Durand, A Voyage to Senegal, Atlas of the Region, page 89. And I guess he said this in 1802. He said, I shall add another reflection of public utility. In other words, that something he thinks that the public should know. It's useful for the public to know. The blacks are a kind of men destined by nature to inhabit Africa and America. She has created them for burning regions. Let us therefore take care not to oppose her views or overthrow the barriers which she has established, but let us preserve their races in their natural purity and not permit the Negroes to inhabit Europe. But it was okay. But you see what he's saying there. The Americas were the natural land of black people, just like Africa. You know, and then he goes on to say this mixture of black and white is dangerous to our population, and in time it may change, corrupt, and even destroy it. And yet, the whole world, as Kofi pointed out in his video, counter-racism. I get it wrong every time. I've got to do better. Countering racism, anti-blackness. The whole planet, up until about 8,000 years ago, was black. So who's getting corrupted? Because now we're lucky if we're 15-20% of the world's population. Who's getting corrupted by the mixture? Not them. Us. Yeah, so this was, it'll be self-explanatory when I read it, and you can see it yourself. You can read it for yourself. I read from a letter Columbus wrote to Lord Rafael Sanchez, treasurer of Aragon, and one of his patrons, dated March 14th, 1493, following his return from the first voyage. He reports being enormously impressed by the indigenous people. As soon as they see that they are safe and have laid aside all fear, they are very simple and honest and exceedingly liberal with all they have, none of them refusing anything he may possess when he is asked for it, but on the contrary, inviting us to ask them. They exhibit great love toward all others in preference to themselves. You see this problem we have, people? They also give objects of great value for trifles and content themselves with very little or nothing in return. I did not find, as some of us had expected, cannibals among them, but on the contrary, men of great deference and kindness. But on an ominous note, Columbus writes in his log, should your majesties command it, all the inhabitants could be taken away to Castile, Spain, or made slaves on the island. There's a video on YouTube where a Jamaican's talking about this very same thing that I'm talking about today. Because all of the Americas, including the surrounding islands, all the natives were black people. They didn't wipe us all out. They didn't wipe all the natives out. They killed a bunch of us. We're still here. We are the Native Americans. Anyways, he said with 50 men we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. Because, we're still those people who, if we see a white girl in trouble or a little old white lady who can't read something on the shelf, we're the first ones to help. We just can't seem to get it. We got that xenophilia. Also something that Max coined. We don't have enough fear. Always ready to help. Oh, this breaks my heart. Okay, back to the beginning of that. So that's the slideshow, but that's not all I've got. So I'll close this one out. And I'm going to have to take the music off because there's going to be some sound. So allow me to do that. Okay, so next, here is a very, very short and important video that you can't find anymore. They scrubbed it. I downloaded it as soon as I saw it. But I used to check periodically to see if it would still be up, just to see how long it would take for them to take it down. So I looked yesterday, and obviously the Indians were those that were painted the way that they had been described by everyone, including Columbus. So just in case you missed it, here is a still of that particular part of the video so you can see what the Indians that Columbus encountered look like. You see any hair hanging down? This is in a museum chapel in Seville, Spain. Have I met the beyond the reasonable doubt standard? Okay, I got one more for you if not. So close this one out. This is like a 6-minute video, and you cannot find this either. This has been scrubbed and taken down. So what I will do is I will put both. It's mostly audio, and just so that there's something else to look at besides this not too interesting video, because it's just like a picture of a paper, a letter. I'll put that pick back up, and here you go.
This document is from the Peabody Museum of Harvard University. It was written in 1848 by Konstantin Rafinesky to a J.H. McCullough. This is the first letter of a series of 4. It follows: You appear desirous to learn something more of my researches on the ancient and modern history of North and South America. I feel willing and happy to be able to answer your inquiries, and even to suggest perhaps some new facts. The continent of America has ever been the field of philosophical delusions, as Africa of fables and monsters, and Asia of religious creeds. All the various systems and theories of monks and philosophers on the origin, climate, and inhabitants of America have been repeatedly destroyed by fact, and yet they find to this day many believers. To this day they speak and write of the red men of America, while there is not a red man, nor never was, in this continent. To this day do they attempt to separate the American languages from all others, while their roots and structures are exactly like many in the eastern continent. When we are led by systems or do not investigate and compare subjects in all their bearing, we are apt to fall into these delusive mistakes. But whosoever will take the trouble, as I've done, to compare the features, languages, religion, customs of all nations of the 5 parts of this world, Asia, Europe, Africa, Polynesia, and America, we will find, as I've found, that mankind is unity with many deviations of features, complexions, languages, religions, governments, civilizations, all derived from single primitive types of those effects and a common central focus. Dr. Rafinescu go on to say, the Native American Negroes, or Black Indians, have been seen in Brazil, Guyana, Caracas, Popayan, Chocho, North California, and some of them, each at the Auroras of Caracas, were black, but with fine features and long hair like the Jolops and Galas of Africa. Others in New California, latitude 32, called Estestros, or like the Hottentots or Tambukis, and many other Negridian tribes, not black but dark brown, yet complete Negroes with large thick lips, broad flat nose, and with hair crisped or curly. The Negro features belong to the form of the head rather than of the color, since there are in Africa, Asia, and Polynesia, black, brown, yellow, olive, coppery, and even white Negroes. The American Negroes of Curanca in Chocho, the great level plain 900 miles long, 90 miles wide, separating the Andes of South America from the mountains of Panama, were black and with woolly hair in 1506. They are mentioned by D'Anguria and all the early accurate writers. The last 2 travelers who have seen these Negroes are Stevenson, 20 years travel in South America, and he published his book in London in 1825, and Molian, who traveled in Colombia, who published his book in Paris in 1824. Stevenson says that the Indians of Manabai, comprising the districts of Amarotas and Rio Verde and Acacamas on the seashore or Popayan, are all Zambos and produced by a ship full of Negroes who came into the country before the Spaniards killed the former inhabitants, kept the women, and formed a mixed race. They are tall of blackish color, with soft curly hair, large eyes, flat noses, thick lips, while the true Zambos or modern offspring of Indians and Negroes are of a deep copper color, with thick hair, not curl, small eyes, sharp noses, and small lips. Thus the great divisions of mankind in regard to their complexion were found in America previous to the modern colonialization. These 3 races have erroneously been called white, red, and black, to which I have proposed to substitute the term of pale, tawny, and dark, which describe them completely. Although it is not the color but rather the features which distinguish them, the geographical correspondent appellations of Caucasian, Amalian, and Negridian races may be equally objectionable, as well as the traditional names of Japhetian, Semitic, and Ammonian races, because they are based upon theoretical origins. Whatever be their names, although once very distinct and probably the 3 primitive deviations of mankind, they have since, like their primitive languages, become so much entangled, intermixed, and changed, so as to have assumed many other shades: white, whitish, rose, ruddy, tawny, brown, brownish, blackish, black, ebony, and etc. A similar confusion and intermixture has occurred with language, which have split from primitive stock into mother tongue, dead Holy Written, and spoken languages, dialects, and subdialects. Thus, in this course of time, producing all the immense varieties of speech that have existed or do yet exist, all of which can, however, be traced to each other by comparative philosophy, deeply searched in spite of theories and the apparent confusion of diversity and difficulty, written in May of 1828 by Constantine Rafinescu. In 1790, the enumerators were told to tell race by skin complexion, as the record keepers assumed that the indigenous people of North America had all died or gone west. There had to be a category for these people that were left over. The category of convenience was free mulatto. Slightly more careful record-keeping used the alternative term free persons of color when classifying. As land on the eastern shores were taken from the indigenous people of North America, the statute of free persons of color changed to colored in the 1800s. Also, in those census records, census takers were told to list Mexicans or Hispanics as white. Through racism and land theft, the darker-skinned people were presumed to be enslaved Africans.
Well, there we have it. So you can tell by the descriptions that these are fully, obviously there's some admixture going on, but the basic stock and the majority were fully black people, people who would definitely be 195 plus on my tool, on the Cree tool. I shouldn't even call it my tool, but because as Neely Fuller said, when you get an idea, don't you take credit for it, because you don't know where it came from. So they were black people. The flat noses, the thick lips, and they were dark haired, dark skinned, and they had nappy hair, So it's just saying that you're a Native American is not in any way trying to distance yourself from blackness. It's just saying you're a particular kind of black, right? No different than the black people in Fiji or the Solomon Islands, or even some that exist on mainland India, or wherever we are. Yeah, it's like the I don't know. The Yorubas are not the same as the Kikuyu, or the Dinka are not the same as the Zulu. We're different. We're the same in a lot of ways. And we definitely have a common foe. But you've heard the $5 Indians talk about. Actually, I've heard the Moors say this. That the form of government in the United States was something that was copied from the Native Americans, which would have been us. And so, what did we learn? Right. So, how's the United States composed? Of 50 states, and each state has sovereign rights. You can't sue a state under in federal court under the 11th Amendment, so sovereign immunity, because each state has its own thing. Like, so when you bring civil suits, even criminal law, it's all particular to that state. Each state runs its thing. Now there's an overriding thing that holds it together, which is the federal government. But it is, what do they call it? E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. We used to know that, obviously, because the people who took us over, they copied that from us. Okay? But we need to learn it again. Federation. Federation is the way it works. You got to have respect for differences, but we got to have solidarity too. Black Federation. So that will conclude this part of the broadcast, and we will take a little break and put up the telephone number and discuss. Anything anybody wants to discuss. You want to discuss this? You want to discuss any of the other previous broadcasts? We can do that. Because this was about an hour and 22 minutes, so we've got about 40 minutes where we can just kick it around, maybe a little bit more. And but this is what I had probably promised a couple months ago. This is the proof. So this is why I call myself a Tamerican, and encourage other people to do the same thing. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so hopefully I can be heard. And now this is the real me. It's not the answering machine. It's not my voicemail. It's Cree. And I want to make sure that people know what the call-in number is. So let me put that up right quick. Not that one. I don't want that one. We've been started. So call-in number is right here. And maybe give people a chance to get themselves together and get their cell phone or something, get themselves situated. And I know that I have Kofi on the line, but I'm just going to give people maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I'll put on a little music for maybe 2-3 minutes and see who else calls in. If not, Kofi and I are always willing to chop it up. He's my not only a moderator, but I had him on my other venue because I consider him a Renaissance man. So he's always got a lot of insights into stuff. Good afternoon, or good evening as the case may be. Good morning in the UK. This is Cree. There you go. That's enough of the music. I hope the phone number was up long enough for people to call in if they wanted to. That number is 760-249-2068. I'll say it again. 760-249-2068. But I should have my co-host, Bro Kofi, over at Countering Racism, Anti-Blackness, the Crab Venue, who did a wonderful segment yesterday. I should have him there. Test. Are you there, Bro Kofi?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
All right.
Ready and around to go.
Excellent. I put up these PDFs because there were a few of the images that didn't show sources. So just want to, people can always just rewind it and go back to the sources later, but I just want to show them real quick. So this is the source of the Tamarican map, the one that shows the word Tamarican in front of a Floridian map that is on my banner. And so the source of that is, as you can see right here, Barry Lawrence Ruderman Antique Maps. And then see the picture. The source of that was not given in the pre-recorded content, but the picture, that pottery, it was made in 1800, and the maker, they say, is how are we pronouncing this? Herculaneum pottery, and it was made in England. Where is it though? Where's the collection? Okay. The National Museum of American History. Yep. And it gives a catalog number and all of that. And I guess this is a person you talk to if you want to try to buy it. Okay. Let's see, what else was not sourced? I don't want anybody saying anything that's not sourced. Here's another map that I don't know was sourced. I don't think that it was. This was the one where I didn't like the picture is the drawings in the lower right hand corner, but the ones in the upper left hand corner were, I thought, black people. And this was a map that was drawn in 1671 by John Ogleby. And let's see, it's going for almost $1,000. And what is its source? Where's it coming from? Oh, this is coming from an actual company that's called raremaps.com. So, yeah, Barry Lawrence, I'm seeing that name again, and I'm not sure what the connection of that is, but I do know that, yeah, Barry Lawrence Ruderman Antique Maps Incorporated. Okay, so maybe he's using raremaps.com as his as a selling portal. But yeah, that's his source. He owns that. You see how all this stuff other people have. We had, what is this one? Same thing. This is raremaps.com, I think. Different map. Gives you the stock number. Yeah, this guy's really in the business. It looks like the same price as long as I haven't repeated. I don't think that's a repetition. It's not a repetition. He's just really in the business. He's making big money selling stuff that they're trying to keep from us. The image of the encounter of the Black Aztecs with the Spanish led by Cortez. Its source is coming from, let's see, it tells you like what the format is, oil on canvas, but where did it come from? You can just look at the URL, thekislackfoundation.org, and they've got a collection. Amazing stuff. I mean, I'm at this point more astounded by how much of it exists and how much of it is they're not hiding from each other, but how much trouble they've gone to hide it from us. And what is this? Okay, this is something else. And this might go, I'll just talk about it right now because it might be, a starting point at some point in the conversation. We now know that the earliest Americans, we know that the whole Bering Straits thing that we learned in third grade about how the first Americans were these Asians who crossed the Bering Straits, and they're called the Clovis Indians, and they came up through the Bering Straits and came up through South America, ended up in North America, and populated all of the Americans. We now know that that could not have happened. The scientists have determined that the research shows that the ice age, you can read it, the research shows that the ice age corridor between Siberia and Alaska would have been too inhospitable a migration route, contradicting long-standing theory. They do a lot of that kind of stuff. This reminds me of the little figurine where they showed a clearly black Native American and said it was an African American in Native American headdress. They just twist things to suit their purposes of anti-blackness. So we know that the people who got here first got here. Oh, looks like I lost Kofi for just a little bit. That's okay though. I'll just wait for him to get back. So we know that the people who got here by way of ships, and of course, who would have been the people most likely to do that? The people who've been around here the longest, black people from somewhere. Kofi, I hope you get back soon, because I'm ready to talk about more than what I'm just doing right now. I don't know if you're striking on me because you were ready to talk, and here I am going over this stuff. Oh, and the world's oldest pyramids, by the way, so far that are discovered, are in South America. They're in Brazil. They're not in Northeast Africa. Okay. Now I cannot go any further because I need to have a conversation. So, I'm waiting on Kofi to come back. We text him. Kofi, you coming back? He's back. I'm ready to talk now, Kofi.
All right. So, okay. So off the rip, I wanted to say that with what you were saying about the shadow of a doubt, I pretty much agree with. But in the fact of before, most folks would say that we're all from Africa. That's the thing. And there was no doubt in anybody's head. Now you've added a shadow of a doubt to my, to that theory, which at this point needs to, we need to deal with that. I had a conversation with somebody the other day. Actually, he was making fun of Moors and I guess American black people who say that we're Native Americans. He was, made one of those make fun of posts, and he said, it's foolish to say that we're from here. There's no empirical evidence that says that we're from here. And so I said, okay, I think that's okay to say that there's no empirical evidence that says that we're from the Americas. Fine, go ahead and say that. But do you have empirical evidence that most of the black people in America are from Africa? And it was just crickets for the next, several days. And I suspect that that's going to be the case in most conversations like that, because indeed, there, outside of the new DNA test, there's very little backing to say that black folks came from Africa. That the slave trade is how black folks got to America.
Right. Well, we know the slave trade happened, and that therefore some black people got here via that way. I think that there is empirical evidence to show slave trade, and that, that there were slave ships that were trafficking Africans, okay, black people from Africa. I don't think anybody who claims that black people are native to the Americas has. I've not run into anybody who said that that did not happen. I've not run into anybody who denied that it happened. It's just about whether or not all of us did and what makes the most logical sense. Now, what seems to me, I wouldn't, if I were in that conversation with that person, I wouldn't agree that there's no empirical evidence that black people were. What is meant by from? What is meant by from America? I mean, from, do you mean away from? Having origins in? I mean, what I would say is I can go to Africa, and we could have gone to Africa in 1500 or 1400 or 1300, whatever. And now we can say the same thing about the Americas. I mean, we can go back thousands of years and we can see evidence of black people in both places. So I wouldn't agree with that person that there's no empirical evidence that black people were in America. I don't know what the word from means in this context. And just as much as there's evidence that they were in Africa. And, I think that, you saw those two white men saying that the Americas and that America and Africa are black lands, and then for what reason would white people draw pictures of black people with kinky hair on the maps with feathers in their hair with Native American dress? Why would they do that if it wasn't true?
Right. That was another good point that you made, that, there's no artistic value in putting black people there if we weren't here already. That's a good point. And like you said, there is empirical evidence, such as the paint on the wall of the Aztec temples, the Olmec statues. There is empirical evidence, but
So wait a minute. So you don't consider. So you consider the Mayan murals at Bonaparte Park and the Olmec helmet heads. You consider that empirical evidence, but you don't consider the drawings of of our enemies, really, right? You don't consider the drawings of our enemies as to who was native to be empirical.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes great sense. That is if we do accept the ancient, which I do, the ancient art as evidence, then it would make sense to take less ancient but still old art written by people whose best interest that we don't know that we're natives here. That would be great evidence. That is a good point. But a lot of times, I've found that folks, when they're on one side of the debate or argument, mm-hmm. they're not willing to shift their views. So right. Usually when I encounter those people, I just I might drop a question or a small comment and keep it moving, because it can easily devolve into some nonsense. So I want to say kudos to you, Cree, because you're one of the first people who, I've heard some people say that black folks are either A, indigenous to the Americas, or B, were here before Columbus. Even Dr. Van Sertima, mm-hmm. But every time I've had conversations over maybe the last 10, 15 years of being on the internet talking to people, it's always, you're stupid if it's always a lot of nonsense in talking with them. I can't say that I've ever had a conversation where I could ask somebody a direct question about their theory and they give me a direct answer. It's always just either hostility or dismissive or posting a picture with no context.
Right.
So kudos to you for not doing that, because what that did was that allowed me to be able to um, put a shadow of a doubt on the previous held theory that all or most black people in the Americas came through the slave trade.
And I think you and I have talked about this before, and I touched on it in the pre-recorded segment. It could be. I mean, it really could be, but lots and lots of white people eventually got here, but they did come through a dark ages, and they were not the accomplished mariners that were the Moors or the black people. The Moors are famed, that's why they have what they have called maritime law and so on. The Moors were the famed; they just sailed everywhere, right? So for me, comparing their skills to white folks' skills, the amount of time that it took, it seemed like it took about 100 years for them to get up to the point where they could, and this is going to get into the whole, well, maybe it could get into the whole the white paternal line of, as it said, of about 35% of people who say they're black, in America. But that's kind of iffy too, because we don't know what black means. What are we talking about here? But what percentage of people in the United States are actually phenotypically black? But where I was going, I think, was, I'm sure it will come back to me, but a more pressing question is, let's say we accept, as I do, okay? So I just, and now I do remember where I was going to go, and I'll tie it all together. I just have a hard time believing that they could transport that many of us in that shorter period of time with the level of technology that they had. It doesn't come close to the level of technology that black people had in the Americas or even in Northeast Africa. So I had a really hard time believing that they could transport that many of us. And why would they? Their first instinct was correct. Like, they tell us in the history books that they wanted to enslave, and in fact, it was part of this pre-recorded content. They wanted to enslave the natives here. Now we know what they drew as the natives. So then they say that didn't work. But look what of course, your first instinct is to use what's there. It's really hard. It's like, why would you import oranges when if there are plenty of oranges or tangerines where you're living? Why would you do that? Like, so it's, to me, it just strains credulity. I just have a really hard time believing that somehow, because now we know that a good portion of the Native Americans were black. So what was so different about the black people in the burning environment of the Americas that could not withstand slavery, as opposed to the black people in the burning environments of Africa who could withstand slavery? What would be that different, so much so that we all died out, the ones in America died out, but the ones in Africa didn't? Like, that's just not adding up to me.
It doesn't add up. And what also doesn't add up is the fact that they're in 1492, they were less than 100 years out from the Black Plague, so they were still like dirty and unaware of hygiene. If we accepted the Black Plague had just finished in Europe, and if we accept that it was a disease,
right,
the regular history, mm-hmm, then it would be hard to accept that they were able to transport so many people in such horrible conditions,
right,
and get them here alive. They just got out of that, and we're talking about 3 months of little food, poor food that you're not,
yeah.
At this point, yeah, I agree that it's tough to believe that millions of people, like, even today,
Yeah.
if
That would be a feat.
in today's, yeah, that would be a feat in today's. If we took today's medicine and antibiotics and all of that and put them on the same type of boats for the same amount of time, black folks or any people, it would be a feat to get millions of people over the Atlantic. So yeah,
It's very, very difficult to believe.
That's something we have to think about. We have to do a lot more thinking about that, and it's in our best interest to do that, to do the knowledge on all of that, because as it stands, we like like we don't know what a black person is. You talk to 10 different people, 10 different black folks, you get 10 different definitions of blackness. You get probably
Yeah.
a similar amount of history of the history of black people in America if you talk to 10 different black Americans. So
For
it's
sure.
very important that we learn and discuss that.
For sure. And I think the most pressing question right now, and like, it's so personal. Like, I think all of us can make it personal. It's really personal for me. Let's hypothetically, just for purposes of argument. Now, for me, it's not even purposes of argument. I believe this is, I believe that most of my ancestry is Native American. Okay, Native Black American. That doesn't make me less black. I'm not. It's not all of that. I just from the facts, and you know, that's all I'll say. It's just from the facts. That's what I believe. But let's suppose it's hypothetical. Now it becomes very personal in this political moment, because let's say we accept that I'm a Native American. I'm a descendant of Native Americans. What does that mean for me in this uh, AIOS, AIOS movement? What does that mean? Because does that mean that I don't qualify? Or do we have to change what the definition of slavery was? Do we have to look back and think about, I kind of touched on that. What was slavery, what we are thinking about slavery was like? What was it really like for our ancestors? If we say we were Native Americans, black Native Americans, when the white folks came over here, we know they were hostile to us. We know they tried to enslave us. Okay? So what did they do to us? What were the conditions? Can we say the conditions were harsh enough to call it slavery and to still be owed reparations?
Well, I think even if we accept that you are a descendant of Native Americans, you still are a descendant of, at the very least, a descendant of everything after um, Reconstruction. So I don't think it changes your claim. But
Oh no, that
also
changes it. That changes it significantly because
do you think why?
well, because there's a lot of harm. Because even if you look at the proposals, there's a lot of harm that came after Reconstruction, like huge amounts, right? But there's also, I think William Darity says that more harm happened after Reconstruction, but still, there's a probably 30 to 40% of what would be due comes just from the slavery aspect. So I think it does change the claim. If we're going to say that Native that the way that we toiled once white people got here is not slavery, wasn't slavery. And now, and let me make my case again. It's the 12 years a slave thing. Um, if we're going on those numbers, that it would be very difficult to get that many over here, then that would mean that the greatest amount of the labor had to have been done by indigenous black Native Americans. But I don't think it could have been done under the conditions that were depicted in, say, 12 years a slave. I think that happened to some people. It probably happened to the imported Africans. But I don't think it could have happened to most of the Native Americans who were doing most of the labor. And it was it under harsh conditions? I believe it was. But that harsh? I can't, like I said, I can't see it because we would have become extinct. Have you ever worked like 20 hours a day? And, even new parents. Anything that stresses you out. Everybody knows that what happens when you're under a bunch of stress. You don't have sex. And, I just can't see it. And, the one part that I didn't get to say is I'm looking at 12 years a slave. I'm thinking about those kind of conditions. And I'm knowing that the strongest sexual organ in anybody, but in this case, I'm going to talk about males, is the brain. Now, you're under those kind of conditions. You're that tired. You're that terrified. You're that angry. You're that humiliated, and somehow you're managing to a bunch of black men were able to just regularly have erections and complete sexual intercourse to the point of impregnating the woman, and then she's got to not have fertility problems because of the stress too. That doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense, and so what it tells us then is that either A, the conditions weren't 12 years a slave-ish, or B, most if they were 12 years a slave-like conditions, then B, most black people weren't under those conditions.
Right.
Right, because I can't say I've done hard work like that in my life, but like you said, even in my line of work, doing transportation, driving people around, on my heavy days, I'm trying to go home and go to sleep.
Right. Right.
And like you said, like raising children, so I couldn't imagine something as bad as what was going as manual farm labor, plus the terrorism, plus the humiliation. Like you said, we would have gone extinct. So there are a lot of questions. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of questions that I have about that time. That that we really, I don't know if we can even get them answered because so much time has passed now. I wanted to make another point. When the Europeans made the printing press in Europe, they started. A lot of people couldn't read, and so they were able to make things. A lot of them people were able to make things up, and then it became real. It became the real history. So
right.
So I can imagine easily the same thing could have gone on over here, because up until maybe less than 100 years ago, most people were functionally illiterate in this country, if not straight illiterate. So if the goal was to hide some truth, then the academians and the people who did know could have easily done it. Like because when you were talking, I was thinking, how could all of these Europeans who spread over the continent, how could they all be convinced to lie to us like this? And then it came to me that most of them didn't know where they were. They didn't know anything. They just knew that there was black people around and there's a whole bunch of land. Let me settle it. But they weren't educated. Most of the people weren't educated. And so when they started to become educated, just like something you told me before, a lot of times, because I asked you, why don't we know our history then? If that's the case, if it's the case that we're native, why don't any of us know our history? Why is it so few of us know it? And you said it was because part of it was that our children went to school, and eventually it's like it's the parents' oral tradition versus the whole school system, basically. And years and years and years will degrade that history. And I can imagine the same would have happened to Europeans. So, the schools telling their European children that black people were enslaved across the continent. They were picked up in Africa and brought over here. Yeah, so I could imagine that happening.
Yeah, it's under harsh conditions, and so now you're counting on an oral tradition to last a couple, 3 generations through, and we know we were marched away from our homelands. We know that there was an admitted trail of tears. It was called the Trail of Tears for slaves. So that one's one that they admitted was black people. Now I'm inclined to believe that all of the Trail of Tears just about was black people. So if you get displaced, you're going to lose so much. Your elders are going to die, and that's not going to be your priorities to remember your oral traditions. Within a couple generations, it's going to be gone. I don't know what you know. What do you know about your grandparents? And it's not even under those kind of harsh conditions. How much do you know about your grandparents or your great grandparents, like exactly what they lived through?
Yeah, yeah, it's very little. Like I personally, I've asked questions, but you already know that they're gonna hide a lot of just the nature of black elders.
Yeah.
They're gonna hide a lot. So extrapolating that to some horrors that was going on back in the day. Yeah, if the Trail of Tears was majority black people, then yeah, we lost a lot of elders, a lot of our oral history, you know, and even if the Trail of Tears wasn't um, black people, and we only had Jim Crow, Reconstruction, Night Riders, and all of that. That's another thing that would have terrified elders into not talking and into dying. Like I don't know how long an elder in that time could have endured the American terrorism in the extent that we're taught that it
Right.
happened.
There's no way they could have. Although there were a lot of old slaves that they show us pictures of. I wouldn't say a lot, but I've seen a few. Um, Getting back to this question of, there's the question of how they did it. I think you settled that one. Um, in my mind, I'm still not settled on. People say, well, because they're devils, um, and they've done it all over the world. But I'm still not settled on why they would. Why couldn't they just say they won? Like what? In other words, they said that they beat the Native Americans. They removed the Native Americans, the Asiatic ones. They said that they moved the straight-haired Apache type people from their lands, and they beat them. They won the Indian Wars. They just won it. Um, so why couldn't they have just said that about us without having to change the physical description? What was the point of that? Why did they need to do that?
Can you repeat what you said? Can you repeat the part about what somebody asked about what they said about Asiatic Native Americans? Can you go back over that?
Okay, if you look at the people that are on the reservations, to the extent that they still, not the ones who've been really bleached out, but the most non-European looking people that are commonly thought of as Native Americans today. Okay, like when we don't just forget about that we even know anything about black Native Americans. Let's just the type of Native Americans that look like Italians, well, no, but that those type of Native Americans. Just give me 1 second here so I can secure the studio. One second. Okay, I'm back. Like going around here around the house. So, those were the people who were thought to be those are the people we think of as Native Americans. Okay, and so we hear the stories about the wars, and even some of it, a lot of European Americans, uh, you know, crying crocodile tears over the unjust confiscation of their lands, and how they were marched over the Trail of Tears and all of that. But they won. They took over this land supposedly from them. That's the narrative. Okay? Why couldn't that narrative, I hope I'm making sense. That's the narrative. Why not? Why do you need to scrub the color? Why can't you just go with that same narrative with the way that up until the late 1800s was the common conception of what an Indian was? Why did you need to say that the Native Americans weren't black? Why couldn't you just say you beat us, like you said you did with the straight-haired ones? I don't understand why I haven't settled it in my mind why they needed to do that. Why wouldn't they just be satisfied with saying we beat y'all ends? Why?
Yeah, we beat y'all. I don't. Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, that is one question. But I mean, it could be that okay. So now, if we take for granted that this was academics who said one day, now that people are starting to read, and now that we're publishing books about American history, let's make sure that
since we have a monopoly on the information, let's make sure that it says what we want it to say, because nobody, the masses don't know anything. Only we know right now.
Okay.
So let's say that, you know, most of these dark-skinned people came from Africa. All of them came from Africa, and B, the Asiatics are the ones that was the natives here. I think one reason might be that being at the academics, they also know the history of our rebellion in the Americas. They know Nat Turner. They know, you know, all the Maroons in the Caribbean and all the Maroons in the South United States. So I mean, maybe it was calculated that if, you know, we write that these black folks were the original, that maybe it would be, then we're gonna have trouble from now until forever. Maybe if we don't, might alleviate some of our future troubles. You know, could be. But I also don't know why they did it. But the white people in South Africa tried the same thing. They tried to say that they tried a couple things. Just briefly, one thing that they tried was to say that in Zimbabwe they have, and I say this to link all the white people up. You know, they said in Zimbabwe that all of the great stone buildings and cities, ruins that exist there, they say those were built by the original white people of the area who came during ancient Greece time, and those are and there were also things like that in South Africa. So because of that, black folks of South Africa, that's why we have a claim to this land. They also, the white people also said in South Africa that they got to South Africa before most black people. There were a couple of black people down there. The Khoisan, I believe, was one of them. But all of the Zulus and Shona and all of the other black people that are more rebellious just got there right after the Europeans. So now I say that to say that it establishes a pattern. Well, two examples doesn't make a pattern, but it starts to establish a pattern that white people do that when they want something. They start to cloud up the waters of history, and so that might be a reason that they chose to say that, you know, we're from Africa and the Asiatics are from here.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it might just go to and also they did the same thing in Egypt. You know, they tried to. When I say Egypt, because for me, Egypt begins over here, and it's in two different places. It's a bicontinental empire, but in Northeast, what we think of as Egypt, in Northeast Africa, they tried to erase the black presence there too. You know, and what Napoleon said about stopping the march of the black man. It could just be as simple as anti-blackness. Anything that could be attributed as something good that a black person did, you just erase it. Because you made reference to this yesterday in your broadcast in terms of when people don't second guess you all the time when you're given opportunities, you know, it builds confidence. And that's been demonstrated in so many psychological studies that when you have confidence, when you believe that you can do it, you perform better. You're smarter. So if you take away the people's knowledge of the history of what they can do, they're less likely to be able to do things. So you just keep scrubbing it away. You're a dummy. You've never done anything. It's like, you know, it's like an abusive relationship. No, you can't cook. No, you can't. You're lucky I'm eating this. You know, my mama could cook. You can't cook. My sister can cook. You can't cook. But I'll come here anyway. I mean, I'm doing you a favor just staying in this house with you, woman. You know, that type of thing. I mean, it could just be just that version of anti-blackness. They just rather attribute that to non-black people, and they're all in collusion. Could be that.
and they've shown examples of them treating us that way. You know, you can't cook, but I'm gonna still come and, you know, I'm gonna still come and take your music. I'm still gonna listen to your music, but your music is ugly. This is Negro, you know, jungle music. But low key, I'm gonna buy it enough that it's the number one selling music for 20 years in America. So yeah, I can see that. I can see that being the case. No, you know, you, y'all ain't from here, but I'm gonna I'm gonna take the things that y'all do here and integrate it into my society. I'm gonna take the foods you make naturally. I'm gonna take, you know, uh, the way you talk. I'm gonna take all of these things. Even though, you know, even though you're a foreigner from here, I'm gonna follow behind the things that you do, uh, to make my life easier instead of following behind the real original people. I'm not gonna eat their food. I'm not gonna do what they do. I'm gonna do what you do, you foreigner. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. I think was it Tom Sawyer convinced Huck Finn. I don't know, maybe a backwards analogy, but Tom Sawyer. I don't know. Did you grow up? Did you have to read that stuff when you were in school?
I didn't, but I did read a lot of his stuff in adulthood, and maybe we can discuss that one day, about, because he made a lot of interesting historical, and there was a lot of historical anecdotes that he gave me that was just very interesting about the history of people in America. But go on about Tom Sawyer.
Well, there was that one story where he was supposed to paint a fence, and somehow he convinced um, Tom Sawyer convinced Huck Finn. It's kind of backwards, that it was an actual pleasure. It was an actual privilege to paint the fence, so that he got Huck to paint the fence for him. It's sort of a backwards thing. Tell you it's something, and that's just, if you think about it, that's just basic economics. Now you're really making me think about it. That's just basic economics. If you if you're selling something, if you got something really valuable, maybe you have an antique, and you take it to an antique dealer, or you take it even to a pawn shop that's got really learned people in it, and you say, how much will you give me for this? Like, this is not much of anything. And that thing, you know that what was brought in was like worth, $600,000. Hey, I can give you 100 for it. I can't give you understand what I'm saying? That's just the basic economics of just deception, of getting over on people. Is just making them think that what they've got is worth less, so that you can take it for nothing and make a lot off of it. Isn't you know? But what bothered me was that quote where they talked about, um, that one quote that I read, where they talked about how giving we were. Like, as soon as we felt like we were safe, we let our guards down, and we wanted to give them everything that we could give them. Um, is I mean, Kofi, is that really our nature? And by the way, we have a third caller. And if you listen, if you don't want to speak, a person who's calling from sort of central California, in a city that I used to pass by when I used to be driving to college. If you want to chime in, your mic is open. But if you just want to listen, you don't have to say anything. You can just listen. But I just wanted to let you know that you're certainly welcome to participate. But it's I think that's starting to bother me. Um, I understand what happened in the Sahara. I think I understand what happened over here in the Americas. Are you aware of Graham Hancock's scholarship? He's the latest rage, the one who's uncovered all this stuff in the Amazon. He's a white dude.
I'm not. I think I saw that one video you posted, and but I haven't. I've written down, but I haven't done any research on him.
Okay, so I mean, I think I know what happened there. I think what he said. What did he say happened? It was something. Oh no, no, no! It was. Do you know that as late as this is according to him, as late as 1500, there were 22 million people living in a super technologically advanced society, where because the Amazon does not naturally have fertile soil. So they had, I don't know how many, but they had cities the size of London, many of them 50,000 plus, all over the certain region of the Amazon. And the way they fed everybody is that they had man-made soil. They had figured out the science of how to make fertile man-made soil. And to this day, people don't know how it was done, but they go and get that soil so that they can transfer it somewhere else and have fertile soil to grow anything. So what happened? What he says happened, that that was the case until 1500, but then Europeans came through with smallpox, and in 100 years wiped out almost 20 million people. This is what they say happened. Now, maybe what happened, I mean, the other thing that could happen is they just came through with more advanced weaponry and marched people north and west and east and south. I don't know. It may sound like I'm meandering here, but I'm getting back to that central question that we all should be asking ourselves. How did we end up in this situation? And is part of it our nature? Are we just too embracing of other people who are clearly anti-Black? Did you mute yourself?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and I that was the one thing I heard from him about the Amazon, and you know, I have trouble with that one though, because I'm gonna need. He said that people are going. Okay, so he talked about this European traveler who
Right.
who went along the river and was finding all these cities cool. I actually found his book, but it's in Spanish. I honestly debated translating it and then selling it,
Wow.
and I'm still
Wow.
thinking about that. It's not difficult to do that either. Like with today's technology, but but it's in cursive.
Hmm.
So it's Spanish in cursive. It's just that's not going to work.
Hmm.
But with theory though, people in great numbers living in the Amazon, I'm gonna need some archaeological evidence, and I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that,
Well,
and it's because
well, he says it's there. He
he
says that
did. Yeah, he did.
the
He did,
water,
and
the waterways and all that, the irrigations that had to be man-made.
is the theory that the Amazon basin, all of those tributaries are man-made?
Not all of them, but not the ones that we're used to have seeing, but the ones that have recently been uncovered. Um,
Okay,
yeah, that there are
okay,
irrigation paths and stuff that there's no other way that for them to be in existence.
right. Right, right. Well, I would love to see some of these ancient cities on Earth, and they can use and they do it all the time. They find old Mayan cities and old Aztec cities using satellite image, using satellite to use radiation or whatever they do to look under the dirt. So it can be done. So I'm all ears for that. But there is there are the maroon towns that existed in the Amazon. The I forget what they call them. Start with a P. But there's very many maroon towns which they say were enslaved Black people who escaped into the Amazon and mixed with the natives there. It's in Guyana. It's in Suriname. It's in Brazil. So that could be one example of these old technologically advanced cities. But at the scale of 22 million,
Yeah.
there should be ample evidence, even today, that hasn't
Well,
been.
well. I mean, I'm not certain of that because, like, as I listened to him, what came to mind was that movie I Am Legend. When things are left untended, especially if you're talking about in a rainforest. Because remember I Am Legend, even New York City, within 5 years,
Right.
wild animals were running through the streets. And
Sure.
so think about that in the Amazon and give it 15 years. Okay, now give it 50 years. It, it just, it would just uh, be completely grown over.
But it wouldn't be gone though. Human, human activity at the scale of 22 million. I don't think it goes even. I don't think even a rainforest can get rid of it. Maybe it could, but I don't know.
Well, there was no evidence of it until they uncovered it, until they started, deforesting it to the point where.
Right.
So, I mean, we know that there were cities that are now underwater. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But under land, it would be even more.
More difficult to uncover it than underwater.
Yeah, I mean, at least because the thing is, there's transparency with water, and you can scuba dive.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's just, if first of all, if there's a narrative that nothing could ever happen there, and then it's
right.
And then there's 50 feet of overgrowth over it. You don't go looking for it. Why?
Right.
What evidence? I don't see how you would see it.
Right. So that's why I said I'm all ears, because as much as folks are crying and complaining, those people down there are deforesting the Amazon. So hopefully they don't just. Now we have to worry about the white folks down there destroying the whatever they find, if they find anything, and they're not opposed to doing that. I remember they just burnt down a museum in Brazil several months ago.
They did? Wow.
Yeah, it was a big thing. It happened this year. I don't know if they said it was vandals or if they said it was an accident, but I'm sure it wasn't an accident, no matter what they said. That's the tragedy of being a black American today. Those of us know that even if you just vaguely know that something weird is happening around us, it's nothing that we can do about it. All we can do is just hope that a halfway honest white person comes around and stops the brutes from destroying the next library. That's the tragedy of being in the position that we're in. All we can really do is speculate.
Yeah, it's true. That is all. That is all we can do is speculate. Until we get to the point where we can defend ourselves. This is just gonna keep going. But let me say this about the whole, African Americans ain't African and that type of thing. And I get something from that. I get something from Dane Calloway. But for me, the biggest problem with them is the way that they define Black Native Americans. They do it in the same way that, unfortunately, that's that one part where I disagree with Dr. Diop. They want to. They embrace hybrids as being black. Just because they have straight hair doesn't mean they weren't black. Those are black Indians. There's too much of that, and because of that, I just can't. I can't with you. I just can't. You need to show me real black people. That's what I'm looking for. And what is also interesting to me is that there were all these sites. It did show these of course it would have these admixed people, but there were all these pages with all these pictures of Black Native Americans, and these people were not dumb people at all, but it just didn't occur to us. See, this is we're just in such beginning stages of just getting our wits about us because we're under so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't occur to you that you should record where you got that from,
you're talking about the group, the folks that show the pictures with no context.
Yes, Yeah.
I know so much energy is wasted. I just want to talk to them and say, listen, okay, maybe you're telling the truth, but what you're doing here is not helpful to
No.
your cause. But
No.
you know, and where that comes from is what I spoke about the other day is our lack of opportunities. We don't learn the proper we don't learn proper ways to write. We don't learn proper ways to discourse with each other. You know, we don't learn any of these things, and all of that ripples throughout our you know, our intellectual development. It causes a lot of trouble, and yeah, that's my problem with them too. I've had to unfollow a lot of people who I think who I grudgingly do it too, because I'm like, man, this person might have some information, but I can't,
Right.
you know, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me because that's not how I work. I can't parrot information that I can't verify myself.
For
That,
yourself,
you know,
right? And it doesn't help because when you don't have civil logical discourse, it doesn't help you get to the truth, And so when you post, like, I think the most one of the most helpful things you've done, so many helpful things, but one of the most helpful things you've ever done for me is to consistently, or here and there post Reddit threads that you find. And the level of discourse, it's not that these white people are any smarter, but and they can get kind of snarky with one another. But basically, they disagree in a very civil way, and they agree to be logical. You know what I mean? They don't start cursing each other down just because somebody can refute what they've said logically. And the refutations are usually done with civility, and people usually accept it with civility, or they go away. They don't start doing these ad hominem attacks, or it's just they get so much further in their exploration of the truth just because of the method in which they carry out their conversations. You know, and
yes, it's wonderful looking at those, and you know, they do go with the ad hominem and all of that nonsense. But what happens is these white folks who develop these discourse tools, they've they've added in checks and balances. So once you do that, because the majority of them aren't the ones that are because the majority of them, yeah, because the majority of them aren't hitting with the ad hominem and cursing. The majority of them are just quietly downvoting the ones that are on the nonsense or not making sense, and so you don't even see it. But there's also negative too, because then also if they see that you're a black person, they downvote you, so you don't even get to get your stuff out there. But it works for them, you know.
yeah.
And even in black Reddit groups,
Mhm.
I found a lot of the um, um, lack of civil discourse there. It's just,
Hmm.
it's just terrible how we get down with each other.
Listeners, I apologize. I thought I had muted my mic, but I'd only done it in the studio, and I'd forgotten that the mic was open on
Mm.
on the conference call. God, I'm humiliated. I'm so sorry you had to listen to that. I'm gonna definitely splice that out. So please, I apologize. I'm I'm yeah, I'm mortified, but yeah, I just wish that we could have a better level of discourse. But I it the pictures. Did you not anticipate that people were going to challenge you? Did you not anticipate that people who don't want to believe you are going to ask you whether or not you made those pictures up? Did you not anticipate? I mean, just basic level of critical reasoning, because it wouldn't have been hard for you. You were right on whatever site that was where you took that picture, right?
it,
So,
it, it makes me sorry, it makes me think that either A, they're trying to trick you for something because they're cutting out something that they just don't want you to know, or B, it's one of the two. And this is another reason why I've unfollowed these people in groups. It's either A, they're trying to trick you by leaving out some pertinent information, or B, they don't want people who will ask those questions and need that verification. They want people who are like them or just not educated very well to just follow behind and join whatever religion that they're trying to make.
Oh, that's sinister. You really think that we're like that? Because that's a huge portion of people.
I
Wow.
think that majority are just immature and not able to do civil discourse, but I think there are people who are, maybe it's not sinister. Starting a cult or a religion is not sinister,
I
but
think it's.
it's just
Oh,
not.
come on. That you don't want intelligent people. You don't want people who can think around you.
No, because maybe you think that you're very smart and you know the best way, and so you just want people around you who aren't going to question you, but you can use their resources to develop it. No, it's not necessarily sinister. Maybe
Okay, I
you
see
are
your
smart.
point.
Maybe you do know what's best for them,
I
and
mean,
you just want. Go ahead.
well, no, I mean, I definitely see that point. I'm not one who agrees that the royalty system has no merits. I understand how the royalty system developed all over the world. I get it. Um, and so I can see that. Well, what I can tell you though, as a woman and a black one at that, that would never work for me. Everything that I said is challenge the hilt. So I always anticipate objections because they'll argue that the sun is up in the sky if they can with me. I know I have to be ready.
Yeah, yeah, and I wish that more people were like that. But that comes from the stress. That's the stress of Black life. You had parents that didn't teach you to be critical thinking, whose parents didn't teach them, and who didn't go to school to learn, and who did go to school and still didn't learn the critical thinking. So and then that might also be their goal too, that they know that Black life has spawned a bunch of people who lack critical thinking skills, and so now they're trying to gather them all up. I think a lot of those movements in the 1900s, the Moors, the Nation of Islam, a lot of them, I think they needed to start out with people who would just follow
Mm,
blindly,
mm,
you know, and probably Christianity too,
mm, mm.
So I've found that in a lot of the Black indigenous um, quote unquote scholars. They don't want discourse. Like a lot of the Moors, they don't want discourse at all. Or if they do want discourse, they want it from only other Moors, which just, like you said, it doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me either. Like I remember when I was younger, I went to a local Nation of Islam mosque, and they said something like Elijah Muhammad is still alive. And this is when I was young, and I was like fiery into Elijah Muhammad's lectures and books and everything. I was like, this guy had it going on. I need to see what his descendants are doing. So I went there, and he's still alive. And they said this during the lecture. So I'm like, right when they said that, I was kind of iffy. But then I waited till the end, and I went to the minister and I asked him. I said, if he's alive, where exactly is he? Oh, he's where he is, brother. I said, he's what? He's where he is, but where? Where is that? He's wherever he is. And I might have asked one or two more questions, and he gave me similar obfuscative answers. And then at that point, I never went to one of those temples again, because it's just like, you're obviously not telling us the truth about something. So I'm gonna have to not be around y'all anymore. Because personally, what happens is I'll start doing outbursts, and then I'll get myself in trouble. So I
Yeah,
just let me just go away from this.
but I've been noticing you. Well, you're very skilled at it. Let me just say that. We can have a group chat about the level of skill that I've seen you up and that I am learning from. Um, and you learned it. you know.
Well, now I'm grown and I don't care, and it's the internet too. So I ain't gonna get jumped on by a bunch of Nation of Islam dudes, but
No, but I still see a skill set there in terms of how you handle unreasonable people. I still see.
Mm.
I still see that. Let me ask you this question, and then I guess we can try to wrap up. Do you find that the critical thinking and level of civil discourse is greater amongst Afrocentric-minded people than the Moorish type? Gosh, are we going to start a little feud war? I haven't found any difference.
Do I find that the civil discord between Afrocentrics is at a higher level than the civil discourse amongst Moorish people, or are you saying from Afrocentrics and from Moorish people?
Oh, is there a difference?
Okay, because if it's, are you saying Afrocentrics talking to other Afrocentrics, or Afrocentrics talking just talking?
Well, if
Or
say if you get into a conversation with a person who would identify themselves as Afrocentric, or maybe you would, it's just clear that's where they're coming from, and
sure.
they say something that doesn't make sense to you. It might make sense, but you ask them a question so to clarify it, because on the face of it, it doesn't seem to make sense, and you do trust your powers of logic. You ask them a question. How do you rate their response on typically, as opposed to that same scenario with Moorish type people or indigenous American type people?
Yeah. Okay. And that's three different groups you mentioned, by the way.
True.
So I would say that everybody, everybody got their individual things going on. Everybody, but to make a generalization about these three groups, I would say that probably they're about the same. In that is to say that they lack ability to discuss topics um, that you might find logically that you might say doesn't make sense logically. I think generally most. I think they. I don't think any group has a very good grasp on civil discord. Now, I have met some Afrocentric types that have had civil discourse with me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I've met any Moors that done that.
Okay.
But another caveat, I haven't talked to too many Moors in my life.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, all very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
find it a shame. I am getting ready to wrap up because, um, you have to go to a lot of different sources to learn different things. Just like you'll be on white Reddit and you'll just look and stuff. And so, when I'm listening to people like Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson or whoever his nemesis was, or Lynn Margulis, people like that. Um, it just makes me sad. You know what I mean? It just makes me sad, and I don't know. Well, I guess it goes along with what I said when I was doing my ranting that wasn't very popular, but I felt like it had to be said. I guess it goes along with the fact that if you leave people alone, if you stop harassing them, if you stop abusing them, they can get healthy mentally. And then, they learn the skills and the arts of many things, including civil discourse. So, like I said, if you ask me which would I rather have, self respect or the equivalent of a nuclear bomb, that's why I said, give me the equivalent of a nuclear bomb, because if you can leave me alone long enough, I can probably get myself respect. I can probably get myself together and learn enough things to have self respect. So I guess we should just expect it, but I don't know what that means for people like, and I don't know what that means for people like in our group. I don't know what that means for people like the people who are listening to this broadcast. Because it's a small sliver of people would find their way to this broadcast and actually listen to a good portion of it. I don't know what that means for us. I don't know I really don't
I
know
don't
what
know.
that means.
I don't know what it means either. But just being a black intellectual, somebody who thinks and enjoys thinking and enjoys discussing your thoughts without trying to fight somebody with your thoughts, you're already in a sliver of people. So that's just going to be expected. And I think that I'm saying our little group, Cree, you and me, our little, small sliver of internet blackness, we have a couple things. We have a couple things in our treasure chest that other people don't have, and so we have a little bit of value that might differentiate us from all the other little slivers in the cyber streets. So there's a small probability that we might get somewhere, and I'm cool with that personally. I think that we have a fighting chance because of our little cache of treasures that we have.
Right. Right. Yeah, because you've made me think that maybe we should go a different direction. That maybe we should just have two different techniques. One for the people who find their ways to this little sliver of the internet, right? People who think critically and want to think critically, right? And then just realizing, just logically speaking, that most people are not like that, and spoon feed them what they can tolerate.
It's funny you say that, and I said the same thing to myself today, and not to say too much, but I think you and me came to that for the same reason. And yeah, I think maybe that's the smart way to go, because one of the things that the old Nation of Islam used to say is that they say you can't feed the baby meat, you got to give them milk, and then eventually give them the meat if they get to the point where they can take it, which shows what their mentality was in developing their movement.
I see. Yeah, that's a certain smarts that's a high level of smarts that I'm coming to very late. But yeah, thank you for that. Well, yeah, I should probably wrap this up so that YouTube can process it, so I can quickly as quickly as I can slice out that one little part. So listen, I encourage people to go ahead and listen. It was a great live stream that Bro Kofi did over at the Crab venue, CRAB, Countering Racism, Anti-Blackness, and it was all about, how the one drop rule just doesn't make any sense in terms of just the empirical evidence. And he went through like a bunch of black, supposedly, air quote, black firsts who didn't look black at all, and why you can't go back and say, well, they back in those days they were treated just like any other black person. He clearly laid out that has never been the case. It was just it was wonderful. I really encourage you to go over and listen to that. But I guess for now, May 25th, I got the date right, May 25th, 2019. This will be the Crab venue and the Cree venue, Brother Kofi and Cree signing out, and we will talk to you next week.